And then we did a second study. This was a really difficult one in both King and Pierce County. That's the Seattle-Tacoma area. I had to find 36 co-investigators to help me collect data on interviews that we would do with tape recordings and transcripts that we had to do of those recordings to determine this very interesting question. If I took emotionally disturbed children or behaviorally disordered children or learning disabled children who, however, had no criminal record, no history of delinquency, and compared them against a group that were delinquent, would we see a difference? And what would it be? Would there be anything that was nutritional in nature? And I thought, okay, it's probably sugar, it's probably food additives because the Feingold diet was being popularized at the time, food allergies, things of that nature. And we found a very surprising finding. First, with the adult population, we found that if we combined information about using diet and nutrition and dietary supplements with conventional counseling techniques, we could have a dramatic reduction in recidivism rate, repeat arrest rates. And it was very impressive. And so this was the first quasi-experimental evidence that had been produced along rather more scientific lines documenting this improvement. The second one was the study in Pierce and King County with juveniles. This I co-authored with Clifford Simonson, again, the dean at the City University, the famous criminologist. And the trouble was that after doing this analysis on the data, we came up with something rather incredible. And we brought in someone else that many of you have also heard from and know, Jeffrey Bland, who at the time was a chemist, assistant professor at the University of Puget Sound in the Department of Chemistry. And this was to try to figure out why did we come up with the results we did. Well, I went down, oh, and one other thing in that same issue, maybe I should do this first. I was also looking at the effects of color on the suppression of human aggression. And this was because at City University, I had an opportunity to work with Dr. John Ott, who many of you know, and we were able to obtain a $50,000 grant from the Leslie Foundation in Chicago, and we started doing studies on the effects of color and lighting on aggressive behavior. And this was really interesting because we identified something which I call Baker-Miller pink, which had this dramatic effect within seconds, faster than an injectable tranquilizer, making people calm. And I had a chance to use it at the U.S. Naval Correctional Facility in Seattle, and where they used to have one serious altercation a day, usually attacks against staff or between inmates. After we introduced this pink room, kind of a timeout room at the institution, there were 0 incidences recorded of any aggressive behavior for a 6-month period. And this went back to the Defense Department in Washington, D.C., and eventually this led to a lot of interest by other correctional institutions around the country. And the next one we did was in San Jose, Santa Clara County, California, where they had the exact same results. They suddenly dropped the incidence of aggressive violent behavior to 0. San Bernardino County did the same thing. Dr. Buccamini there, a psychologist, reported back on his results. And pretty soon we went, whoa, we've really got something here that we can use in correctional institutions to reduce the level of violence both to staff and to inmates. And so it started to become somewhat popularized, and then National Public Radio and then PBS took an interest in it, and they sent a film crew to San Jose, invited me down there, and they demonstrated exactly how fast this worked. And they took a lieutenant on the Santa Clara County Sheriff's Department, and this man was using these barbells of 110 pounds and just lifting them like they were nothing. Huge 25-inch biceps. And then they showed him the pink color, and he could not move these biceps. He just couldn't believe it. No matter how much he tried, he just couldn't move them. He lost all his strength. And he said, wow, this is really incredible. Well, that taping turned out to be of some value to a show called That's Incredible, which was, I believe, the most popular television show in the nation at the time. And they showed it one evening, this 20-minute program about this invention, this discovery of this Baker-Miller pink. And from that point on, my phones went absolutely bonkers, and the post office would have hundreds, sometimes more than hundreds of letters requesting swatches and copies of all this. But what eventually happened is you get these wonderful things like no wonder the Pink Panther is a pussycat stories. And then look at this, what happened in professional sports. They banned Baker Miller Pink. This was a fighter who was, according to all the odds makers, guaranteed to lose this battle, and he comes out, his name was Thomas, in pink shorts, okay? Now, you know when you box, you don't come out in pink shorts, okay? It's just like the right thing to do. And so he shows up, of course, just like you know, the audience is, you know, the crowd's laughing. Okay, he's got his pink shorts. He had a pink gown on, so he comes out there, he shakes hands. And you know when the referee brings the two boxers together, right? You know, it's to explain to them what the rules are and how to conduct themselves and et cetera. And they were predicting that his opponent would just knock him out in the first round. Well, he knocked him out. You couldn't believe, because guess what? The opponent was looking right at this pink. Okay? So he could hardly get his hands up to defend himself, and he was just like annihilated. And I mean, just the odds maker went, what happened? That was incredible. So, of course, next thing I got a phone call from the Dallas Cowboys, and they said, that's a football team, not soccer, but football, for those of you who know what football in Europe is. And they call me up, and the coach says, hey, Alex, you know, would you like to come down to Dallas and show us how to use this? Because, you know, we're thinking of repainting the visiting locker rooms. So, and by the way, coaches around the country got that, and all of a sudden there were teams going into the women's, you know, locker rooms. They were all painted pink now. So these teams got trashed pretty quickly. But the worst part of my life was about to begin. And this was when I went down to I think it was the 13th annual meeting of the ecology group that was studying the effects of allergy on health and behavior. And they had heard about my research in Pierce and King County with the delinquents, and they said, well, have you presented your data anywhere? I said, no, not yet. And they said, well, we have a conference. We'd like to invite you down there, and would you, you know, talk? And it was like a 3-day conference. But every 20, 30 minutes, a different presenter would talk about their research. Little did I know that the San Diego Union was in the back of the room that Saturday morning. And I talked about our findings. And what we found was excessive milk consumption among delinquents. That was the significant finding. It wasn't sugar. It wasn't anything else. It was just these kids drank an extraordinary amount of milk. And many of their parents described how these kids would get into fits of rage if there wasn't milk in the refrigerator. So they always made sure they stocked the refrigerator full of milk. And when I remember, it was one of our co-investigators who called me at home and said, Alex, you're not going to believe it, because she was breaking down the data and breaking down the codes. And she said, these kids are drinking a lot of milk. And I said, oh, come on. You know, milk's a wholesome food. And they go, no, not for these kids. I mean, this may be the thing we've been looking at. I said, you can't go out in the world there and tell people that milk is causing delinquency or something. And she says, that's what the data shows. And I showed it to Dr. Simonson and to Dr. Bland and to other people. Everybody said, Alex, that's what it shows. So we went down there, and we were very cautious. We said, these are preliminary findings. These need to be replicated by other investigatory groups. But it's an interesting finding. Well, the San Diego Union puts it on the front page. Study hints too much milk may spark juvenile delinquency. But guess what the media starts to do with it? So here is an Associated Press release. Too much milk cited as cause of delinquency, right? This goes out all over the world, okay? And milk sales decline all over the world. The National Dairy Council writes this 6-page letter, sends it to my university, urging that I be fired. The dean, however, Dr. Simonson, he stands up and tells the university he's the co-author, and the data is sound, but preliminary, as was reported. And then, within half a year, 3 states and Calgary, Alberta detention homes confirmed these results. So the media disregard these confirmatory reports. But I had to deal with the National Dairy Council for years. They put me on their blacklist. Anywhere Alex Schaus showed up, go after him. He's a danger to our industry, and you know, he's a crackpot, a quack, you know, not a scientist, and on and on. It never stopped. And here was the Seattle Times article, and this is what I